Well, good morning then, everyone, and welcome to another update from us as we head into another week's trading on Monday, the 26th of June. We'll just look at the markets. We'll see what's going on across the headlines. We'll jump across to some charts now in a minute, and the calendar for the day. We can see oil climbs, ruble falls as markets take mutiny in stride. There was a bunch of Russian mercenaries, the Wagner group, they call them. They tried to overrun Moscow, tried to go and take Moscow, which obviously will not be taken too lightly by Vladimir Putin and the regime in charge. But it shows a bit of underlying weakness, a bit of underlying kind of instability in within Russia, which I think is maybe something we can look at going forward. I mean, we'll see if people within the country are are attacking the government or wanting to take over the government to try and stop what's happening. I mean, that's obviously not a good thing for the country kind of going forward in terms of continuing on their war in Ukraine. And if that war in Ukraine does stop and it finishes, then that's likely to be seen as a positive for markets. But markets not really running with it as of now. Talking about oil being slightly higher, talking about potential supply concerns from oil. I wouldn't read too much into this scenario or situation. Sorry, I think it's a bit of a non-event, and yeah, I think we can skip on just past this, and yeah, move on from this pretty quickly. But so maybe worth keeping an eye on. But to be honest with you, I can't see it really impacting markets too much, if I am being honest. Japan's top currency diplomat escalates warning against weak yen. I mean, I don't know what he expects. I mean, you've got you got the Japanese yen, or the Bank of Japan, sorry, continuing on with negative interest rates, continuing on with yield curve control, continuing on with QE, right? All these things that these central banks were doing at the beginning of COVID, cut interest rates to zero, unprecedented amounts of monetary stimulus. They then remove that stimulus. They then start to hike interest rates, and the Bank of Japan just sit there and do nothing when the rest of the world is hiking interest rates and removing QE, which is just negative for the Japanese yen against every other currency. And now then they come out and they start complaining about Japanese yen weakness being rapid and one-sided. They've come out and they've defended the Japanese yen before a number of months ago, and what that resulted in was a slight defense of a level in dollar yen, and then they kind of gave up on that pretty quickly and allowed it to break through. So we'll have to see what they decide to do here. But they can defend 145 on dollar yen all they want, but as long as other central banks keep hiking interest rates and these do not hike interest rates and continue to say they will not hike interest rates, will not remove yield curve control, will not remove QE, there's no reason there's no reason for Japanese yen strength when the rest of the central banks are doing what they're doing. So yeah, I don't know. You can defend it all you want, but you'd have to imagine they'll cave at that at some point, unless they decide to go and change it, allow interest rates to rise, and that'll be a situation where the Japanese yen definitely does strengthen. So something worth keeping an eye on for now. 145 level dollar yen, I think, will be important. As we come over to the grid, you can see stock indexes higher across the US, higher across Europe, but really, none of them are up. They're basically flat on the day. You can see 0.11, 0.13, 0.06, 0.17. They're all basically flat on the day. You can see Asia Pacific equity futures, CSI is down, but the rest of them kind of flat. I mean, there's nothing really to see here on equity markets this morning. You see oil up slightly, just under 1% for crude, so it's slightly higher, but gold, silver, copper are not doing much. Bitcoin, Ethereum not doing much. You can see bonds are higher, but then yields are lower, but they're not really moving too much. You can see global bonds pretty flat. The US dollar was pretty flat to start, kind of about 20 minutes, half an hour ago. Has turned a slight bit more negative, but it's still it's pretty flat. It's nothing's up or nothing's down by too much. You can see the Australian dollar pretty red. You can see the Kiwi dollar pretty mixed. Canadian dollar, a bit of strength across the board in the Canadian dollar, which we will have a look at. In a video a little bit later on. We can see euro, Swiss, yen, or euro, sterling, yen, all pretty mixed. You can see dollar Swiss, or Swiss franc, sorry, only really down against the Canadian dollar. So really not a lot of movement across the board of markets today, and that has been replicated across the charts once you get over to it. You can see the US dollar across the board. You can see the Australian dollar, Kiwi dollar, Swiss franc, dollar CAD, euro, cable, dollar yen, dollar index, all choppy across the board. Now, Kiwi had a slight bit of upside this morning, and then a bit of downside. Then, as we're heading into this European session, it's just met back in the middle. really there's not a lot to talk about. I'm kind of just waffling here, to be perfectly honest with you. You can see these equity markets flat across the board. You can see the S&P, you can see the Dow, you can see the Nasdaq, the Russell, all flat. You can see the DAX, you can see the FTSE, the Nikkei, all flat. Nothing really to see there. You can see bond yields, 10 years and 10 years and 2 years. I'll just flick back this to the US 2 years. We can see here just flat, nothing really happening. 10-year flat, nothing really happening. Obviously they've been through the S&P, but dollar yen, Aussie yen, sorry, CAD yen, pretty mixed. You can see gold flat. Oil's had a little bit of upside, but even then in the chart you can see it's not really resulted in massive upside. It's still a percent higher, but not really breaking through any levels or making any significant headway back up inside that round number of 70 or back above that round number of 70. So really there's not a great deal to see this morning, right? One thing I would know is this Ifo Business Climate, that this has been a pretty good front runner for the DAX over the last 6 or 8 months. So if you're a trader of the DAX, I will keep an eye on this consensus of 90.7. You can see DAX had a pretty good uptrend once it was matching up with this uptrend here, and then the uptrend kind of stalls a little bit, and then we've gone from 93.4 to 91.7, and now we're expected to come in at 90.7. So I think a miss on sorry, where we are? Sorry, a miss on this 90.7 consensus on the Ifo Business Climate out of Germany, I think is important and is relevant for the DAX going forward. So I would keep an eye on that this morning. Certainly, that will be a factor in my trading decisions over the course of today. So I would keep an eye on that, especially if you trade the DAX heavily, trade the Euro heavily. That is something that you should keep an eye on. But I'll leave that up to you. See what happens over the rest of today. But that's that's really where we're at over the course of today. There's not really a great deal more information we can take from markets. Pretty flat start the week, and yeah, we'll see where we end up come US session today.